If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, what is the creepiest thing you've found or experienced outside that you can't explain? My brother and I backpacked off the trail. We realize how dangerous this is, deep through the mountains in North Carolina, and found this gnarly cave. We decided to use it as shelter for the night, and while we were making it feel like home, we heard this bell off in the distance. We were extremely weirded out considering how far off the trail we were, and we haven't seen another soul in hours. We began yelling to see if anyone or anything would reply. It began getting closer, and that's when we wielded our weapons. Finally, out of the fog, running at full speed towards us, is a soaking wet dog with a harness around his chest. He runs right past us as if he were late to work. He kept running up the mountain full speed, and we never saw him again. Here is what the cave looked like for those who are curious. My family camped in the same place every year, awesome campsites, and it was surrounded by miles and miles of forest. Anyways, a couple kilometers from the main area we found this barbed wire fence, and being boys we had to get over it, but at the time it was much too tall. So we dug under it with my father's old tactical shovel, fold-out shovel with a blade in one side. Anyways, we finally squeeze under and we make our way into the forest. We walk for about 20 minutes and we don't see anything, and then we stumble upon a river. It was the middle of summer and the river was running low, so we climb down the bank and decide to follow the river because we had nothing better to do. We follow the river for a while until we come across a strange sight, a very old, very rusty VW Beetle half buried in the bank, partly sunk into the riverbed. The front end was punched in and the seats were ripped apart and all the glass was missing. The weirdest thing was there was this giant hole punched through the roof. The metal was bent outwards like something had punched through from inside the car. The doors were rusted shut, but with our handy pocket knives and my dad's old tactical shovel we ripped over the driver's side door. The other one was sunk into the muck and inaccessible. Inside there was one leather shoe, still tied, just sitting there. It was super creepy, and thinking about it now I'm pretty sure something fucked up happened, but as kids it was super cool and creepy. We never told anybody about it, and we returned to see it every year when we went camping, bringing our friends along and such. The last time we went there the car was pretty much gone, totally sunken into the mud. The creepiest thing, honestly, was that there were no roads for miles around. It was all forest. Something I constantly pondered was how the hell it got into the riverbed in the first place, and where the hell the original driver went. I grew up in rural southern Kentucky. My parents lived in a neighborhood down in a little valley, lots of open, rolling hills, which was surrounded by woodlands on most sides. It was freaking awesome for a kid, tons of room to ride ATVs and explore. My cousin, we'll call him Brian, was my BFF. We'd spend most weekends together. That typically consisted of staying up late playing video games and watching MS Tech. Well, sometime during the fall of my third grade year, we decided to go outside late one night to do whatever the hell third graders do in the sticks at midnight. Some exposition. We had a big front yard which sloped down to the basement entrance. The slope was seriously maybe 40 degrees, it was nearly impossible to walk down. At the bottom edge of the yard, we had a dog house where our German Shepherd and Beagle slept. The back and sides of the house were surrounded by several acres of fields which all sloped down and could be seen plainly from anywhere in the yard. Got it? Okay. We're sitting in the front porch bullshitting. There's a full moon, and everything is sublimely still. We get bored, decide to go in and play Sega, but we have to sneak through the basement door so we don't wake up my parents. As we walk around the house to get to the door, we stop at the top of the slope. Both of the dogs are going absolutely batshit insane over something. Out in the field, maybe 75 yards from us, is something as big as a small car, solid black, sprinting a good 25 plus miles an hour. No shape that we could discern. Had it not been for the moon, we'd never have seen it. We run down this slope, because fuck gravity, and slam the door shut, lock it, put a couch in front of the door, and pray. Neither of us had any clue what else to do. We didn't tell our parents about it the next day. We figured they wouldn't believe us. Flash forward to my senior year of high school. I'm talking to a teacher on a school trip who was well versed in local ghost stories and general weird shit. I tell her the story of the blur, as I'd taken to calling it. She tells me that she's heard numerous accounts that were almost identical, stretching all across southern Kentucky, going back almost 30 years. Reports of a large, black creature gliding through the night, generally fucking shit up for a lot of unfortunate animals. It was pretty messed up to hear someone give credence to what I'd known about for all those years. That was almost 10 years ago. This summer, I moved back home with my parents for a few weeks. That's when I came across this total number of Kentucky Bigfoot sightings, 398, and I promptly got the fuck back out of the woods. A couple years ago in high school, a friend and I were selling cinnamon roasted nuts at this 2-day fair for his dad's side business. It was in this smallish town in the Midwest, real charming place in some ways, but kind of spooky at night. Lot of mixing of highways and back roads to get wherever you needed to go that could get disorienting if you weren't from around there. On the first night, after we packed up, we were looking for dinner and decided we wanted to hit up a Sonic we'd seen on the way in. Naturally, because we're idiots, we get lost. We're driving around outside this little set of gas stations and mini marts trying to figure if we're shamed enough at this point to go in and ask for directions to a fucking Sonic, when we spot one of those blue highway signs, the kind for gas next exit and such. This one looks kinda weird, because there's no wording and its edges are all torn up, and it's just a picture of the Sonic logo with a white arrow pointing up into this road leading into the woods. We went up it because, as mentioned before, we're stupid. We're driving around in these woods for about 10-15 minutes, no other cars, no lights, no deer or birds, and definitely no Sonic. To take the edge off, we're cracking jokes about how if we hear banjos or see anybody lurking on the side of the road, we're just pulling a U-turn and bolting. Then we hit a dead turn and pull into this unmarked dirt grove full of trailers. Now, it was dark. I don't know if maybe the road goes through there, or if we turned at some point and didn't realize it, or if it really is just a paved, serviced road to get to this grove. I wasn't really thinking about that at the time, because the moment we pulled in, every single one of those trailers lit up, and people were peeking through the windows. One of them had something in his hand, and it might have just been my crazy brain, but it sure as hell looked like a gun. I don't know how fast we were going when we finally got back to those gas stations, but it was faster than I've ever driven before or since. I can't tell you what we saw up there. Maybe it was just some sort of camping site. Maybe we just woke up a few sleeping families and one of them happened to be a jumpy hunter, or maybe there never was a gun at all. But I keep thinking about that sign. Man, that looked like it was cut out of a legitimate highway board and stuck there by somebody else. It was on a wood stake. It was all cut up and worn. I keep thinking about that dead turn, and how coordinated those lights were when we pulled in. I don't know what would have happened if we stayed in that strange little camp, but I'm glad I never found out. Oh, I've had this happen several times to me. The calm before a storm is real. One time that will stick with me is when I was out fishing with my dad. It was a pretty shitty day, and after a while we could see some pretty mean looking storm clouds off in the distance. All of a sudden everything got quiet. No more birds, no more wind. It was extreme quiet. The lake surface was smooth and we stopped drifting. We continued to fish for a few minutes when my dad froze and said, "Lincoln Navy, do you hear that?" I stopped moving and listened. I did hear something. A faint rustling sound that was slowly growing in volume. My dad, as he is quite the outdoorsman and has most likely experienced this before, pointed toward a far shore and said, "It's the wind." I looked in the direction he pointed, and I could see the wind. Or more, I could see the effects. A line of disturbed water was moving toward us from the shore, and everything behind it was being whipped around. Trees would get hit by the line and all of a sudden look as if in a storm. The rustling grew in intensity as the line approached us. Still utterly calm where we were, my dad and I watched. This line of chaos raced toward us, and when it hit it was night and day. A wall of air slammed into us, causing us to physically recoil, and we were instantly in a storm. At least no rain was present yet. The wind howling around our ears made the low rustling sound immediately transform into a harsh, continuous blast. Communication went from quiet voices to yelling toward each other. My dad yelled to me that we are leaving before it gets any worse. And so we hightailed it off the lake as it began to turn into angry seas. Fun times. We were planting some flowers in the garden of a house we had just bought from a very strange looking Russian woman. She'd only wear extremely baggy and oversized clothes, didn't live at the house, etc. We found bags full of rotting women's underwear. The bags were full of bras and panties that had been slit open with some sort of blade or razor, clean cuts in the fabric that were not in line with seams. Another bag contained a bag of keys, each key a woman's name on it. A golden crucifix necklace was also buried in the key bag. We called the police. They brought a cadaver dog to sniff around the garden, but they didn't find anything. When we suggested they look in the woods that surrounded the property, they said they'd get back to it. They took the evidence into custody, and promptly never returned. To this day, people claim ghost sightings and other strange events happening in those woods. About 2 weeks ago I went hiking on a trail that is well known, so see other hikers or mountain bikers is not uncommon. While I was walking up the trail I happened to come across this girl who seemed kinda out of place, like she is not quite dressed right for hiking but not totally in wrong attire either. As I get closer, about 10 to 15 feet, I call out, "Hey, How's it going? Have to let her know I was behind her so I didn't surprise her when I caught up in half because she was really cute. She looks back and says not too bad, how about yourself? I catch up to her telling her not too bad, great weather for hiking. As we walk up this trail we chat and she a very giggly person, we continue talking and walking for 10 minutes or so when she stops me and says, you want to see a meadow I found before? It's kind of off the beat trail but it's really pretty to see. Now normally I wouldn't follow some strange into the woods for who knows how far to find a meadow that may or may not really be there, but I'll admit I was charmed by her. She was very attractive and fit my idea of a perfect girl. Also she was short, like 5 feet 1 inch or 5 feet 2 inches, so I wasn't really afraid of her. I said yeah sure, we've got plenty of daylight to get back, let's go. She throws her hands up and goes, who, let's go. As she grabs my hand and pulls into the woods, as I bumble through the woods she is ahead of me, dancing through the woods, hiding behind trees and peeking out the other side, then laughs and keeps going on. Thinking back why it never occurred to me that this girl is gracefully bounding through the woods like a deer while I stumbling through like a drunken prom date, I'll never know. We've been going through the woods for about close to 20-ish minutes now and I can see the trees start to thin out and beyond that is empty field about 20 yards away. So I pick up my pace and catch up to her. I'm about 6 feet from her when she says, come one, just this past this tree. She looks at me and steps behind the tree like she has been doing during this wood walk, so I run to the tree and say, let's see if we pick the same side to jump out. Ready, go. And she's gone. There is nowhere this girl could have gone once past that tree because on the other side was the open field. I've never had a cold spike of fear hit me so hard before. I was freaking the fuck out, my heart was pounding, hair on my body standing on end, and cold sweat. I was scared so bad I was frozen for what felt like forever. Then I heard her fucking giggle and turned around and ran so fast that Usain Bolt couldn't catch me. How I found my way back to the trail is beyond me, but even after I hit the trail I didn't stop running. I ran back down the trail until I started seeing black specks from lack of oxygen. I've told this to 4 people, only one believed me, even, but more so in the manner of yeah man totally I believe now, can we go back to being normal kind of way. Girlfriend, her sister and I were out driving around one summer night. We wound up at a small lake and stopped to just enjoy the quiet and the moonlight over the lake. My girlfriend says, what's that? Pointing out toward the center of the lake. There was a small patch of what looked like fog just sitting there. As we sat and looked at it, I realized that it was expanding almost imperceptibly. My GF sister asked, is it getting bigger? I said it was, and we kind of just laughed and watched it. Then it started getting much larger, much faster. In about 30 seconds it was very dense and about 100 yards across. It was also about 75 yards from shore. We got into the car but didn't leave yet as we were mesmerized by how fast it was growing. As it got closer to the shore, and more dense, we then got properly creeped out enough to hightail it out of there. As we drove out via the winding road, we could see that the whole lake was engulfed in fog and it was lapping over the shore but not quite advancing past it. We decided to mark that lake off of our go back list. One night sometime in August last year my dog disappeared. I decided to go look for him in the woods that night, so I brought my shotgun, a few shells, and a flashlight. I had gotten about 30 yards into the woods when it started raining. Because it was nighttime and it was so cloudy it was abnormally dark in the forest that night. I walked along calling out for my dog for a mile or two when I realized I had strayed off the path and was lost. Now I've explored these woods for almost 12 years now and this is the only time I've ever been lost in them. Nothing looked right and I just couldn't figure out which way I had came in. As I sat there I noticed how quiet it had gotten. I mean dead silent. No birds, dogs, or anything moving around, only the rhythmic sound of the rain hitting the ground. Then about 20 feet to my left a twig snapped. I whipped around and started shining my flashlight over there. About 3 feet off the ground I saw 2 eyes staring at me. I didn't see anything else, just the eyes glinting off the light of my flashlight. Well, it obviously wasn't my dog because he was only maybe a foot tall. So I raised my gun and started yelling at it. Nothing. It didn't move or blink, it just sat there staring at me. I started to get worried because whatever it is obviously isn't afraid of me or it would have run off. So I shot a warning shot off to the side of it and that's when it made the most god-awful, gut-wrenching noise. As it turned to run away it made a noise that sounded like a mix between a pig squeal and cat screaming. I turned and ran like hell. I have never in my life heard a noise like that before. Adrenaline was pumping through me as I bounded through the forest hoping that I would eventually find the path again. The whole time it sounded like my heart was in my ear and I was just overcome with fear. Eventually I did find the path again, but I was past the path that took me out of the woods. I stopped to turn around when I heard that noise again. Right in front of me. Shit, that thing has blocked me out. So I loaded another shell and looked to see if I could see it. I could faintly see its silhouette as it was hunched over on this embankment above me. So I just shot blindly into the direction I saw it from, and I think I hit it. It made that awful noise again, and I heard it crashing through the brush off in the distance. I finally managed to get back out of the woods and went to get my dad. He heard it and believed. I know what I heard and saw, and that's never happened to me ever again. I never saw my dog again either, which makes me think whatever was out there got him. There's a small graveyard near my home in Michigan. About 2 years ago, a group of my friends and I went ghost hunting there. It was a warm night, clear skies, and I was raring to catch a ghost on my friend's camera or tape recorder. Even a cell phone video would do. The cemetery is less than an acre, so it didn't take long to scope out. We broke into groups of 2 and 3 and traversed the grounds. I wandered with a few people, changing from group to group. I felt restless. Usually when we were ghost hunting, we cracked wise, but nobody was saying much. A group near a tall monument, at least 7 feet high and shrouded in vines, called us over. There seemed to be a cold spot about the size and shape of a very tall man. I waved my hands through the air. It did feel a bit cooler, but that could have been my imagination. Everyone began taking pictures, claiming they could see a figure in the digital photos. I hung near the back of the group, not seeing anything. I still felt disquieted. I didn't want to be here. That was when a cold shock squeezed my hand, right between the web of flesh between my right thumb and forefinger. I cried out, yanking my hand away. It hurt. The cold radiated slowly off my hand, and I retreated towards the gate. I'm out. Something grabbed me. I'm out. I was quickly followed by the rest of the party, not so much because of my encounter, but nobody wanted to be in there anymore. It wasn't until the morning the bruise showed up. Deep in the meat of my hand, not a bad bruise, not bad enough to turn black and blue, but definitely there. Yellow and painful, right in the spot where I'd been grabbed by that cold hand. I haven't been back. I've got a few. When I was in my early 20s, I lived on Oahu with my sister. We liked to go hiking, not on any established trails. We'd just pick a likely looking spot of woods and start exploring. One day we decided to explore part of the mountains a mile or 2 from our house. After wandering vaguely uphill through the woods for a couple of hours, we came upon 3 stone cairns. They were good sized, maybe about 6 to 7 feet long, 5 feet wide at the base, 5 to 6 feet high. And they were old. They were covered with vines and leaf moss, and just had that worn look that very old stone gets. We figured they were old burial cairns. We stood and looked at them for a few minutes, then without really knowing why, I put my hands together and bowed as a sign of respect. My sister did the same. Then we circled around them and kept hiking. Fast forward a few more hours. We were starting to reach an area that would have been too steep to go much farther, and we realized that we had lost track of the time and the sun was setting behind the mountains. Well, we were screwed little idiots. We had nothing with us, not even a flashlight. We started heading down as fast as we could, but the dark caught up to us. Just before the light went away completely, we started to hold hands so we wouldn't lose each other. Now, this was no place to be lost in the dark. We'd passed several crevasses and cliffs that would kill you if you fell off, and it was literally so dark in those woods that I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. We were scared, for sure, and didn't know what to do. Then suddenly, my sister starts walking and leading me down the mountain. I figured her eyes had adjusted and she could somehow see better than I could, so I just trusted her and let her lead. Her pace never faltered. She kept walking steadily and ended up leading us out of the woods exactly where we'd gone in. I let out a big sigh and told her I was so glad she was able to see enough to get us down. Then she turned to me and her face was white. She said, "I couldn't see a thing." Someone else took my other hand and started leading me. I was so scared I just closed my eyes and followed. She said whatever took her hand had let go just as we stepped out of the woods. We never went back to that spot. My sister still doesn't like to talk about it. I left the islands more than 20 years ago, but I'd like to find that place again someday. Just to say thank you. A couple years ago I went to a summer camp in Upper Michigan. So at this camp you always go out on overnights at different camping sites around the Up. So my cabin and I went to Sherwood Forest, not in England, which is a site miles in the woods. It was getting dark after we made dinner and we went down to the river to wash the dishes out, and across the river there was a lamp being held by what looked like a hand, but I couldn't make out a man behind it. So my friends and I just blow it off and go back up and get in our tents. So at about midnight I am woken up to my friend who seems very startled and worried, and he says, "Do you hear that?" I didn't hear anything at first, but there was this constant drum beat going on in the distance. So everyone in our tent and the other 2 tents were scared shitless. Exactly 15 minutes after I woke up, the drumming stopped, somewhat relieving, until we start hearing gasping and choking and struggling. No words, just constant choking. Within a minute or two it stops, and immediately after it stops there is a very loud screech. Our counselors had us leave and get picked up at 1245 because of this. No one has explained it at camp, and I don't think anyone will. So one night after drinking a fair bit at a friend's house, I decided to go home via shortcut and promptly got myself lost along the way as I went along a forest path. The fact that it was during the fall and it had started to drizzle didn't make it any easier to see the solid shapes of pine trees in all directions. I was disoriented and I was lost in a forest. Then I noticed the shapes of the trees some ways ahead of me move. I couldn't hear a single thing over the rain dripping down from all the trees around. I could just barely make out this shape in the forest moving in front of me. It was far longer than any animal had right to be, and I swear it was coming closer to me because the spaces between the trees where I could see a distant clearing were taken up by the solid shapes. I lost my shit. I screamed and I ran. And I fell forward into something. It smelled horrible and my one hand was squished into the wet warmth of it while my other hand clenched against wet pine needles and cold dirt. I recognized the smell and felt blood on my hand as I withdrew it from the half solid and half liquid I'd fallen into. It was all over my clothes. I was quick to my feet but disoriented. I ran, getting whipped by undergrowth and my clothes snagging on the low stub branches of old pines. And I could hear them coming after me. The shape that was in the darkness, the shape that had approached me between the trees, it was coming after me, and now I could hear it above the rain as it rushed after me. I could hear how dead branches cracked and underbrush was pushed aside as it gained on me. And I had no idea what it was. I didn't want to know what it was. I was terrified I'd have the same fate as whatever half-digested thing I'd tripped into. In my disoriented state I had run for the nearest edge of the forest where a paved road was. I scrambled through the ditch and onto the road. The thing in the woods refused to follow me. I could see the solid black shape moving between the solid trunks of pines, stretched out between them longer than any animal could be, and through the darkness I could discern the many legs of whatever that abominable thing was as it prowled the edge of the forest. I ran along the road. Faster than I've ever run in my life. At home, and feeling considerably more sober, I found my clothes covered in blood and slime from whatever those still warm remains on the forest floor had been. I saw Golem in real life once. It was when I was staying with my dad out in the country. It was late at night and the dogs started going apeshit, so my dad and I went outside to see what all the commotion was about. The dogs were at the edge of the fence, barking at the trash cans. It was trash day, so the cans were on the street. From our vantage point on the porch we could clearly see something big, rummaging through the trash, but the trees in the area cast a shadow on the cans, so we couldn't see it very well, just a silhouette of something that we assumed were a group of raccoons. Whatever it was, it must have heard us talking, because it stopped, stared in our direction for a moment, and then slinked away, across the street, into the trees. We lived on an orchard. As it crossed the street, it came out of the shadows and was illuminated by moonlight, and I swear to fucking God, it was Golem. It was pale, skinny, bipedal, and too tall to be a raccoon or a coyote, or any sort of country critter. Now normally, if it had just been me alone, I would have chalked it up to my eyes playing tricks on me, but my father saw it as well, and he also saw exactly what I just described. This was maybe 10 years ago, and to this day I still wonder WTF it was. One summer I was on a 3-month spelunking trip. We were slated to explore 13 caves that were only lightly documented. One in particular was 12 chambers deep before we came upon the small opening for the water source that created this particular system. I was the only one that could fit, so I was the first choice to head down it. About 150 down and around a few corners I found myself at a small opening into another larger chamber. The only way I could make it through this opening was hands forward, only pulling myself with my fingers inch by inch. I found myself with my chest pressed tight in the opening when I heard a noise echoing in the chamber. I realized that it was my heart pressed against the rock so tightly I could hear my heartbeat echoing in the cave. Well, I managed to pop through, and as I turned back to mark the hole I came out of, I looked down and saw the lower half of a human jaw. I suddenly felt panic. I imagined this hole was like someone sticking a hockey puck in their mouth. It would go in but it wouldn't come out. I basically grabbed the jawbone and leapt through the hole, tearing my spine all along my back. This was one of the creepiest things I have found in my lifetime. Went for a midnight walk with my BF and dog about 4 years ago after we moved to a new apartment. We went walking around a really popular lake, but this was like 12:30 or 1 a.m. Anyway, we get near the end of the walking path, and we pass a senior couple slowly walking past. Okay, weird, they should be asleep, they're so old. Then we continue walking and my dog stops at a park bench to pee and there's a fucking old man sitting there silently. Holy Christ. Spooky, come on dog. We walk a little bit further and I swear my memory is not cloudy here, but there's got to be a dozen or more old people just standing and slowly walking around this part of the path. Some are sitting and some are in couples. But nobody is making a sound. My boyfriend and I kind of drag each other and the dog through the mess of old people and briskly GTFO of there. I contacted the local folklore ghost guy, but he said he hasn't heard anything about that area. There's no old folks home in that part of town and certainly no seniors home is going to sponsor a seniors walk on the lake at 1 in the fucking morning. Still freaks me out. When I was probably 15, I was spending a fall weekend at my best friend's house. She lived on a dirt road off of a rural county road in the middle of nowhere. It was probably about 3 a.m. and we were bored, so we took a walk. This being the middle of nowhere, there was hardly any light pollution, and you could see thousands of stars in the sky. It was a clear, cool night, and we were just walking along, talking, our eyes totally adjusted to the dark. All of a sudden, there was a blinding white flash, so bright, I couldn't see anything but white for a split second. As suddenly as it started, it was over, and my friend and I were sitting in the middle of the road. We both must have dropped right where we stood. It was quiet again, and the sky was still clear. Sitting there in the road, totally stunned, we confirmed that we had both been blinded by a super bright light for half a second, that had apparently knocked us over. There had been no cars, no accompanying sound, just a light so bright we couldn't see anything else. We got up, went back home and went to sleep. My friend and I drifted apart over the years, but ended up working in the same building years later, and we met up for coffee. She brought up the incident, and still remembers it the same way I do. We never figured out what happened. About 3 years ago, or so, I was driving home with a friend of mine. The two of us lived about 30 minutes from the other people in the group we hung out with, so we always carpooled together. It was probably around 3 a.m., and for some reason we were on a road we don't usually take. I can't remember exactly why, but if I had to guess, I think we were coming back from a concert or something that was slightly off of our normal way home. The road was a woodsy, 2-lane road, just the traffic going my way and the oncoming traffic, with lots of twists and turns. We were talking and having a good time. We got to a straight stretch of the road and I had a little trouble seeing. Immediately after turning my high beams on, slightly off the road and to the right was a lady, dressed in a white dress of some sort, wouldn't say wedding dress, but not a normal everyday dress either, carrying a bag walking towards us. I swerve, both of us let out a slight yelp, and then we slow down, silently. We both look at each other, then look back. And there was nothing. Absolutely nothing there. Friends we have told it to joke that we hit her and we'd just left some lady in the middle of the road, but I swear to you she vanished. It is one of 2 events in my whole life that I have yet to have explained. Me and my college buddies love camping, and behind my house is an acre or 2 of unsettled, unclaimed woods. We camp back there often, relatively close to my house. It's all for us, since no one lives in it or owns it. Anyway, it was mid-January, and we decide to go camping. The 5 of us get our gear together, have dinner at my house, and then head out. We go pretty deep, there's a clearing we go to and make a fire when we camp. We set up our gear and go to bed. But it's freaking cold. Like, -35°F. We decide to not stay up and play cards. Now this is when shit gets real. We hear rustling of leaves in the distance. It was faint, but audible enough to hear. It wasn't normal walking, it was offbeat. Humans have a beat to their steps. It was either not human, or injured severely. It stops, and we continue playing. A few rounds later, we hear it closer. My buddy, let's call him Joe, gets his flashlight, and walks out. I tell him to stoke the fire while he's up. He stokes it, and takes a look around. After a few minutes, we reports back. Nothing is around, but one of our benches is tipped. We use the spot often, so we've lashed benches and a table between trees. We've decided to all keep an eye out, so we fix the bench and sit by the fire, eating cheese and crackers. It's probably about midnight or 1 a.m., when we hear the most distressed, high-pitched shriek from the woods, not that far. It sounded like a banshee being raped, if that describes it. We run into the tent, gather our shit, and get the fuck out. I was backpacking on the Appalachian Trail with a group from a summer camp. There was about 5 of us campers, ages 11 to 15, and 2 counselors. We had hiked all day and set up camp on the side of a grassy mountain. At dusk my friend and I were walking down to the closest water source about 3/4 mile. On our way down an older man came out of the woods a little ways front of us. He looked mid-50s and had camping gear, normal enough. He begins to walk with us and starts a conversation. It's general trail talk. Where are you coming from? How far are you going? How long have you been on the trail? Then his questions started to raise red flags for me. Things like, how many are in your group? Are there adults? Where are you staying? I give vague answers and exaggerate the size of our group. As we talk and walk, he is slowly lagging from walking in front of us to beside us and then behind us. He asks our ages. I'm 15M and my friend is 13F. When we tell him, he said to her, "Oh, you just became a woman, didn't you?" Me and her made eye contact. I was uncomfortable before, now we are both on edge. There was an awkward silence between the three of us, and I take a knife from my cargo pants pocket and clip it to the front of my belt. The man apologized and said he didn't mean anything by it. We kept walking in silence. I heard a strange amount of rubbing and shifting of cloth. I look over my shoulder and the old man was repeatedly groping and rubbing his crotch while walking behind us. We were about at the water pipe at this point and can see a group of collage kids getting water for the night. Feeling relieved, we scurry to them. The old man follows and we all talk and fill our containers. Me and her stall walking back and the old man starts to stall too. When the collage kids finish washing up and getting water, we all say our goodbyes. My friend and I follow the group of kids further down the mountain. The old man just stands there and stares at us as we walk a few yards behind the group. After we got around a bend in the trail, we shout to the collage kids and tell them what happened. They escort us back up the trail and look for the old man. He is nowhere to be seen. They take us up to the camp, the rest of our group. I'm not exactly sure if we was bad or not. Maybe he had poison ivy and I just looked back at the wrong time when he was adjusting himself. Maybe he was socially awkward like some outdoors men are. I will say something about the whole situation was wrong. The way he looked at us when we walked away with a group of collage kids made my skin crawl. This happened to me just last week, and I still can't get it out of my head. It was the night before Christmas Eve. A mate and I had decided to do some last-minute Christmas shopping, and we had just left, heading home. It was late at night at this time, about 11:30 p.m., we were driving down the main road back to my house when suddenly I saw something in my peripheral vision. I looked next to me and saw on the corner of the footpath, just before a pedestrian crossing, a young child, maybe 10, 11, slumped over a stationary bicycle. He was hunched over it, his arms spread out over the handlebars and his head lolling on top of them, still with a helmet on. His clothes looked old and dirty. He was not moving, at all. The kid looked like he was passed out, or worse. I got real worked up straight away as we passed the boy, and started yelling at my friend, "Did you see that? And turn around now." I was ready to call the police, or someone. My friend was a bit confused but still turned around, and as we went back, he was gone. Of course. We went up and down a few times, back to the exact street corner he was on. But nothing. It was really messing with me and I needed to know what happened to him. If he was okay. I thought I was maybe going crazy until my friend fessed up that he saw it too. But was too scared to say anything. He said he watched the kid in his rear view mirror as we drove past and he saw the front wheel move slightly, but then he got distracted doing a U-turn and lost him altogether. We're still trying to figure out what happened. We came to the conclusion that it must have just been some kid playing a prank, mainly so we could stop thinking about it and get some sleep that night, but who really knows? I'm still thinking about it a week later. Never so scared in my life. And this happened today. It's wintertime and I'm home for the holidays. I mainly do farm work etc., but now I'm taking a break after working horses all day. I decide to walk my dog through a local woods maybe 15 miles from my home. Worst mistake ever. To clarify, I'm a 6 feet 1 inch 187 pound man who wouldn't be afraid to fight if my life came down to it, but overwhelming fear came over me in them woods. I had misjudged the time I was entering the woods and the time nightfall would come, and during my walk darkness ascended onto the forest. I only met one group of people walking and they were leaving, giving me odd looks for walking on my own into the forest close to nighttime. As I enter the forest, I unleash my dog from the lead. My dog, Jess, weighs about 90 pounds and is very friendly normally, so as I walk through the woods I begin to feel like I'm being followed. It's hard to see because it's so dark, but from the amount of time I've lived in the country I know what are normal sounds and what are man-made. At this moment I become unnerved. I wrap my dog leash around my knuckles preparing to fight for my life. I command Jess to stand close to heel so I can watch her reaction to things about me. She becomes worried and glancing behind me and on occasion stops and look back, in the same way a dog might look at a rabbit or animal moving in the distance. At this moment halfway into a 40-minute walk and are very unhinged about this feelings. I'm well used to walking at night and not a person who gets easily scared, but the night you merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, sorry awful quote. But anyway, I was being guided by my phone light off my iPhone, and at this moment I begin to seriously think I was being tracked, so I turned it off and moved in the darkness. All was quiet in the woods, I mean no birds, no wind, nothing, is like the whole forest was waiting for something to happen. And then I lost my dog. Oh shit, where is my dog? Come here. Panic set in. I can't wander these woods at night searching for my dog, so I use my last effort, my hunting whistle. I use it to call the dog back after hunts, etc. This whistle doesn't occur naturally, it's a 3-part whistle with 3 tones, so it's hard to mimic, but this is when shit get real. Someone replied to the whistle, returning my whistle to me maybe 60 feet behind me. I repeat the whistle to locate this person, but none came back. I was freaked out. I kept on the walk with a wrapped knuckle and watchful eye until I got to my car, where I calmly locked the doors and floored down the country road. Thank fuck I wasn't killed by the hash-slinging slasher. Unfortunately late to the party, but last July, I saw something that I still can't explain. And it honestly makes me feel uncomfortable thinking about it to this day. I live in a very rural area where there are many farms and open fields. In fact, there is a field right behind my house. The first 7 acres are owned by my family and aren't used for farming, but everything past that is used by a local farmer. So one day after my parents and I arrived home from eating at some restaurant at around 8 p.m., it was dusk, nearly dark. On a complete impulse, I suggested that we walk to the back of our yard to look at the fireflies that live in the unused section of the field. So my mom and I walked back to the field. There's something weird in the field, 2 steady, circular red lights. They are up by the farming section of the field, and they are both about 5 to 10 feet high, parallel to the ground, with some amount of space in between, not sure how much, maybe 15 to 20 feet. I asked my mom if she sees the lights too, and she said yes. We both thought it was strange, but thought maybe the farmer just had left his tractor up there for some reason. Until the lights starting fucking hovering up and down, still straight across from each other, still steady. They didn't blink and the lights never actually changed direction, they were facing us and looked the same the entire time. The lights started moving away from us, while still going up and down, so we chased it, trying to keep them in view. We chased them until they went behind a cluster of trees and just completely disappeared. They should have appeared on the other side, but they just didn't. They were gone, along with my feelings of comfort in my home. Was serving my time in the army, and one regular night everything started becoming creepy. One slight detail that I can't remember was that the day coincided with a local event plus a world event, I think it was holidays plus blue moon. And everything rolled regularly up until 10 p.m. where we went in our facility to sleep, 5 of us, one about 15 meters away being on guard. We decided to have fun instead and just started telling random stories, and at some point I fell asleep. Fast forward an hour later, the guy who was supposed to be on guard, and I was the one to swap him, wakes me up. Me thinking that he just abandoned his position, I started getting ready for my shift. He asked me what I was doing, and that's when I realized everyone was awake and outside of the room staring at the sky. It was about 11:30 p.m., hundreds of birds started flying above the facility, centipedes start getting out of the river across the road, and huge orange/yellow cockroaches just flew in the room. We were stationed next to a village that had a church, whose bell started ringing for about 10 minutes straight. All the dogs of the village woke up and started barking, and suddenly every cloud started moving really fast, you could barely focus on one. Now with the whole area being infested with cockroaches and centipedes, and a small harmless snake, we just decided not to sleep that night. We got our knives on and just started messing around. Up until 4 p.m. this continued, apart from the church bell, which actually lasted for a good hour. After that we heard a loud continuous noise, a mix of a car alarm and a cricket, which kept getting louder and louder for about 10 minutes. We saw a huge swarm-like wave approaching us from the sky, run to a shelter and waited for it to pass. Suddenly the noise stopped, sky cleared, and the bugs started heading back to the river. My boyfriend and I were laying out at the beach around 11 p.m. on like a Wednesday. We live in a small beach town and it was completely deserted, but we were sitting right under / to the left of the lifeguard tower. A group of maybe 15 or so young guys came walking down, and from their perspective, we were hidden because of the way the boardwalk was placed. My boyfriend and I are kind of ignoring them until we see one of them force another guy onto his knees right on the shoreline, and we hear some kind of chanting going on. So at this point, we basically know we're about to witness something they don't want us to witness, so we could either hide or run. I start hyperventilating because I can't see anything clearly other than a huge mass of people, and I start begging my boyfriend to run with me into the dunes so we can leave. We ended up sprinting out of the lifeguard station onto the dunes, and get the fuck out of there as fast as we could. We called our buddy who owns a restaurant on that beach, and he said he didn't see anything out there. Shit still freaks me out when I think about it.